This is a 9 News special presentation. Election 2024. America decides.
Good evening from Washington, D.C. I'm Charles Croucher and I'm coming on air from the heart of a nation once again grappling with its own future after yet another election for the history books. Donald Trump, the former president, is now once again president-elect, denying Kamala Harris momentum in what's being called the most astonishing political comeback in all time here in America. At this hour, all of our affiliates, CNN, still have Donald Trump just shy of the 270 electoral college votes he would need to secure victory, but he will get there. Even in the popular vote, which the president-elect has never won, he leads Kamala Harris by more than 5 million votes. Speaking to the party faithful in Florida, the president-elect says he has survived assassination attempts for this moment. He's dedicated MAGA supporters celebrating the win and continuing that party into the morning near his Mar-a-Lago home. N9's Jonathan Kersley has been with them every step of the way.
Donald Trump arriving to applause. The 78-year-old addressing the faithful, declaring victory after all the numbers stacked up in his favour.
I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honour of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
He sensed success hours before, greeted by a room full of his closest supporters at his Mar-a-Lago home. In the crowd, chief cheerleader and billionaire Elon Musk, who on X called it early, game, set, match.
You think it's done?
Yeah.
So then we're done. I mean, are you surprised? Because I'm shocked by how quickly this happened.
I'm not particularly surprised.
Australia's richest woman, Gina Rinehart, also in the crowd. On the streets outside,
Florida is roaring right now.
Yes.
Donald Trump supporters tuning in, and they liked what they were seeing.
Everything's looking good from where I see it on TV.
The first building blocks of the Republican candidate's red wall were falling into place.
CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the state of Florida with its 30 electoral votes, as expected. Donald Trump, CNN projects, will win the state of Tennessee, as expected, with its 11 electoral votes.
Fox News can project that former President Trump will win the state of Indiana.
Trump will also carry nearby Kentucky.
It was early days, but there was little blue on the map of red.
Donald Trump has 154 electoral votes. Kamala Harris has 27 electoral votes. 270 are needed to win.
Judgment Day. Trump's campaign continued until the very end.
Our Republicans, we're doing really well. If you're in line, stay in line. Don't let them take you off that line. Vote.
After 2 assassination attempts, the former president felt bulletproof as he cast his vote.
No, I feel very confident. I have felt. You know, we went in with a very big lead today.
Wife Melania by his side, he pushed back when asked to control his supporters.
I don't have to tell them that. And I certainly don't want any violence, but I certainly don't have to tell. These are great people. These are people that believe in no violence. Unlike your question, you believe in violence.
President Trump does not win this election. There will be rioting. People are going to go crazy.
And in his corner, he had a Kennedy plotting his reign.
He wants a revolution, and I think he's going to get one.
But a victory first. Trump seizing momentum and clinching one of the must-win battleground states.
CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the state of North Carolina. This is the first of 7 battleground states that we're keeping an eye on.
Georgia was next to fall, and it wasn't the last. A shock even to his most stalwart defenders.
What we have, Pennsylvania, is this a call, ladies and gentlemen?
It was.
The Fox News decision desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to know.
Once again, Donald Trump has defied his doubters and his critic. Tonight, he makes his way home to Mar-a-Lago to go to sleep as the president-elect of the United States once more, and the world waits to see what comes next. The oldest person to run for the presidency, the first with a criminal conviction, and the first in 132 years to win a second non-consecutive term. A comeback that's made political history. At Mar-a-Lago in Florida, Jonathan Kersley, 9 News.
The president-elect might be sleeping right about now, but US correspondent Jonathan Kersley is not. He remains in Mar-a-Lago, Florida for us. Jono, it's just after 5 a.m. where you are, but there are the die-hard supporters. Have they cleared out, or are they finding somewhere to party on?
A couple of them have returned, and you would expect more to come back over the course of today. They cleared off not too long after Donald Trump made that speech at the Palm Beach County Convention Centre, about 6 kilometres or so from where I'm standing. And then we saw Donald Trump make his way back here. But for his supporters, it had been scenes of jubilation. They were popping champagne corks and celebrating in this car park before he had even got to his feet. Many of them say that this is a moment they have been waiting for 4 years. Essentially, they view him as a messiah, and tonight it seems as though he is returning to the White House. As I mentioned, Donald Trump made his way inside Mar-a-Lago a few hours ago. It remains to be seen exactly what his new day is going to bring. But soon, Charles, the sun will rise here in West Palm Beach, Florida, on a new dawn for Donald Trump and a new dawn for America too.
Those crowds will likely flock back to where you are. Jono, go and get some sleep. Thank you. Let's bring in our US correspondent, my colleague and my friend, Lauren Tomasi. She's in the battleground state of Pennsylvania tonight. She's been there with supporters of both sides. Lauren, good evening. That battle was won by Donald Trump. What did the voters tell you did it for them?
Look, Charles, good evening to you. It was such an interesting state to watch here. You and I have both talked about how important Pennsylvania was to this race, and in the end it was a slam dunk for Donald Trump. Voters right here in Philadelphia, this was a county that was won by Kamala Harris, but in the end it was the state of Pennsylvania that sealed the fate for Donald Trump. We've crisscrossed this state and spoken to so many voters in the likes of Northampton County, which is such an important bellwether. In the end, it has come within a percentage in those kind of counties. It is so close, but then in other areas it has taken off towards Donald Trump. I've been in both camps across the city tonight. There were elated Donald Trump supporters and very defeated Kamala Harris supporters across the city. This was a place where both of these candidates ended their campaigns, their final stops in this long-running and historic campaign. But look, certainly tonight it has gone in Donald Trump's favour. And the show now rolls on. We've got cars back on the roads this morning and people are waking up to go to their jobs. Life is turning a brand new page, and with Independence Hall behind me here, Charles, it certainly is a historic mark to turn this new chapter.
It's seen a lot, that hall, Lauren, and this is just another chapter, as you say. Thank you. Stay with us. When we return, those critical battleground states, it's now a matter of when, not if, Donald Trump reaches 270. Our US election special continues after this break. Welcome back to Washington, D.C. for this extended edition of Nine's Late News and America Decides. Well, coming into the election, there were 7 battleground states that were going to decide who became the next president of the United States. Let's look at where those battlegrounds are standing now, beginning with North Carolina. It was the first state to be called that was called for Donald Trump. At last counting, he remains 200,000 or so votes ahead, having won 51% of the vote. He won that state in 2016 and 2020. It wasn't the same for Georgia. He lost that to Joe Biden in 2020, but Donald Trump won back the state of Georgia. He remains 117,000 votes ahead, having received 50.7% of the vote to win all 16 electoral college votes there. Then it was the state that will eventually put him over the top, Pennsylvania. All roads to the White House led through the Keystone State. Tonight it's paved in red for Republican because Donald Trump leads by nearly 200 100,000 votes, again with more than 50%. Michigan is a state that Donald Trump won in 2016, lost in 2020, and while it hasn't been called by affiliates, he leads there by 114,000 votes, with some votes still outstanding around Detroit. Wisconsin is another one of the blue wall states that Hillary Clinton thought would propel her to victory and Kamala Harris hoped would propel her there. It hasn't so far. 110,000 is the margin. Donald Trump with well over 50% of the votes. When we go west, there are states that are still counting. Arizona is one of them. That's where it is closer. 55,000 votes is the margin there. That was one of the closest states back in 2020. Donald Trump looks as if he has flipped that result. And finally, Nevada, the state that many thought would be looking to for answers in the early hours of this morning. Donald Trump is ahead by 57,000 votes and is receiving more than 51% of the votes that are counted so far. So of the 7 swing states, Donald Trump has been called or is leading in all 7. US correspondent Alison Petrowski is in Washington, D.C. She was at the Kamala Harris rally that was meant to be a celebration party but turned into quite a damp mood. Ali, how was it and how were the spirits there?
Well, it started off so joyful, like I guess the start of Kamala Harris's campaign, if we can think back 3 months ago, Charles. Lots of dancing. It was a real party mode. 20,000 people crammed into her alma mater of Howard University, a place that was close to her heart, and she had chosen that because she realised that this could potentially be an historic moment. And for a couple of hours, things were going great, but there was a particular moment, Crouch, when the Virginia figures, the early Virginia numbers came out, and there was just a real change in mood in the crowd. Everyone started mumbling and kind of looking at each other and looking sideways at discussions of, hey, that can't be right. What's going on here? We always win Virginia. And then from there, we just kept seeing these big ticks come up alongside Donald Trump's face. There were boos from the crowd. And then there was just this really kind of awkward silence for the best part of 2 hours. It's hard to explain the sound of nothing coming from 20,000 humans who are crammed in one spot. But that's what it was. And then eventually her campaign co-chair came out to say that she won't be speaking tonight. And it was a weird thing because there was still a potential chance at that moment that if she did get Wisconsin, if she did get Michigan, if she did get Pennsylvania, if she could hold on to that blue wall, then she potentially had a path. So everyone kind of left thinking that, it's not completely over. But then I think within 15, 20 minutes it became very clear that Donald Trump was on his way to winning Pennsylvania, and it was all downhill from there.
Ali, do we know when the Vice President will speak?
Well, look, her staff have been telling us that we can't get back into Howard University until 11 a.m. No one can do live hits until 11 a.m. I would sense that they'll probably give networks a couple of hours to set up. It is coming up to 6 a.m. Right now in D.C. So let's say it's not going to be in the next 5 hours, but potentially within the next 7 or 8 hours. And I'll be interested as well, Charles, to see if they bring in a crowd again, because, I mean, she got 20,000 people there tonight. It is quite clear that she's lost. I'm not quite sure how you fill those big fields, that big quad at Howard University, and fill them up with people to hear what they know is going to be a concession speech. I'm interested in the choreography and how this plays out.
Ali, as we've been speaking, our affiliates have called Wisconsin, which I think is enough to officially declare Donald Trump the winner. We've been saying it for a while now, but our affiliates, as we're on the air, have declared that Donald Trump, on the bottom of the screen there, has gotten up and over 270. He is now officially, according to the affiliates, president-elect. We've been calling it for a while. You've been up for even longer and have a concession speech to report on in not too long a time. Thank you for your time tonight, and we'll see you bright and early for the Today Show tomorrow morning.
Thanks, Charles.
All right, let's go to Jared Monshine. He is the Director of Research at the United States Study Centre in Sydney. He joins us now. Jared, thank you for your time. Firstly, coming into today, did you expect anything like this?
Well, I definitely saw a Trump victory as a possibility, but I guess I was, to be honest, expecting there to not be much of an answer for maybe a day or two. The fact that Trump not only won, but won so decisively was, to be honest, a bit surprising. I thought it would take a longer amount of time to know states like Pennsylvania, but the fact that he was able to perform so well in not only North Carolina and Georgia, but also in Pennsylvania, that really sealed the deal, and that allowed us to know who won the election fairly quickly by historical standards.
Coming into this election, the gender divide had been prominent. It's been prominent in the campaign, and in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, there was an expectation that women would come out and perhaps propel Kamala Harris to the White House as the first woman. Did we see that in the results?
We definitely saw a gendered election, arguably the most gendered election in modern American history, but it just wasn't enough female support for Harris. And I should note that support actually goes beyond just white women. It includes a lot of non-white women. If you look at the way that Donald Trump actually got more votes as the Republican candidate than any other Republican presidential candidate in modern American history, that's not because of all non-white voters. It's particularly because of Hispanic men and black men. Those two demographics in particular showed a significant swing towards Harris. Now, Trump did not win all of them or the majority of them, but he won such a sizable amount that it was just enough to tip it over towards Donald Trump.
Put yourself in the role of future historian. What are the lessons that we've learnt from this campaign?
Oh, there's so many different lessons to learn. I guess we still need to see the exit polls and the demographics and how exactly this electoral loss occurred for Harris. But I think at the end of the day, the Democrats have to wonder if they just need a stronger candidate. There was a lot of questions about Kamala Harris. Ultimately, she was one of the very few Democratic politicians who were less popular than Joe Biden himself, whose popularity is in the high 30s, low 40s. And so maybe that was a risk. Maybe they needed to have more of a Democratic primary to sort of fine tune and test out the other options for the Democrats moving forward. I think it's still too early to tell what the takeaways are, but more than anything, I think Democrats will want to have more of a stronger candidate moving forward in 2028.
Final question. We know that Australia and the US have been brought closer by AUKUS and the Quad. What's it mean for our relationship, this result?
As an American in Australia, I've been asked about this election for some time, about all elections, and about Donald Trump for many years. And, I said, if you look at Australian interest in U.S. politics, it's sort of unbelievable to me. In 2016, they consumed more information about the U.S. election than they did their own that year. And in 2020, Australians Googled U.S. election news more than they did COVID. But I also said at the same time, the stakes could not have been lower for Australia, because I think there's so many structural issues that make the U.S.-Australia alliance far broader than any one president or prime minister. There's a reason that both Albanese and his predecessor, Scott Morrison, both got state dinners by Donald Trump and Joe Biden. There's a reason that AUKUS is likely to go ahead regardless of this electoral outcome. There's a reason that the U.S.-Australia alliance has weathered decades of history and very different prime ministers and presidents. I think ultimately the structural dynamics, the U.S. national interest and the Australian national interests are so aligned that I think, yes, there will be lots of different twists and turns in the relationship, but on the whole, they are more aligned than ever and continuing to align regardless of this electoral outcome.
A busy and interesting 4 years ahead, Jared. We appreciate your time tonight. Stay with us. Our US election special continues right after this.
It is now official. CNN projects that Donald Trump has been elected president, defeating Vice President Kamala Harris and making a political comeback unlike any in modern American politics.
That was the moment our affiliates at CNN declared the victory for Donald Trump. It happened in the last 20-odd minutes. Let's see exactly how we got there on 9 special coverage of US Election Live from Washington, D.C. This was the map as it stands right now. That is where it's at. You can see Donald Trump with 276 electoral college votes. Only 270 are needed. What we might do is play out what's going to happen for the rest of this election, at least where the polls are standing. That was the 7 battleground states as it started. And as the night wore on, we saw the first to go was North Carolina, getting Donald Trump one step closer. Then the call with Georgia also turning red, which turned the 2 southern states of North Carolina and Georgia into Donald Trump's column. And then it was Pennsylvania and eventually Wisconsin, which was more than enough, put him over the edge. And from now, it seems like Donald Trump will sweep across all of those battleground states. That will get him somewhere around 312 or so electoral college votes. That's more than his win in 2016. It's more than Joe Biden's victory over him in 2020 and puts him a little bit closer to Barack Obama's victory over Mitt Romney in 2012. Joining us now is Professor Joe Siracusa, who has seen all of those victories and more. He is a presidential scholar at Curtin University in Perth. Joe, thanks so much for staying up for us. At the start of the day, you firmly predicted it would be a Donald Trump victory. What did you see to make that call at the start of the day, and did it play out as decisively as you thought?
Well, Charles, if you live long enough and write enough books, you start to see things and patterns. Donald Trump is my 15th president. I've witnessed 13 U.S. presidential elections while in Australia. I arrived in early '73 after Gough Whitlam was elected and Richard Nixon were elected. And so you get to see things, you get a feel for it, you get to talk to people. And last July, I went to Washington for a couple of weeks. I wanted to talk to some people to see if the polls were right and if Washington got it right. And I could see when I was there was a disconnect between policymakers and ordinary people in the street. Now, look, $16 billion was spent on this election, most of it on very faulty polling. The polling was terrible. In fact, it was probably crooked. I mean, at the end, it just became thinly veiled propaganda. None of that stuff was true. And of course, the end of the day, I think Trump played a better hand. You know, he's been running for president for 9 years. And before that, he was a consummate television reality host with a very popular show. And so, you know, he literally destroyed or ate Kamala Harris alive in the media. I mean, he just did better jobs than she did. And I think she was ill prepared. What I mean by that was she wasn't given much time. She only campaigned for 16 weeks. She didn't have enough time to sharpen her skills. She didn't have a lot of talking points. She just kept saying, you know, this other guy's a fascist. I mean, Donald Trump wouldn't know a fascist if it fell on him. But the thing is that she wasn't really prepared for this guy. And let's keep this in mind. The American people make these decisions at the end of the day. It isn't trickery by Trump or failure on her part. The American people repudiated the Biden Harris foreign policy and domestic policies. They repudiated their elitism in recent years, and they rewarded Donald Trump, who was frankly on his way to Rikers or prison somewhere in Georgia if the Democrats would have had their way. I mean, and I heard President Eisenhower say in the 50s when I was a kid, once the people make up their mind, Charles, he used to say, you know, get out of their way because they're going to run you over. And they decided that they were going to return this guy to the White House. And this is just dripping with irony. You know, here's a guy that was disqualified for the presidency after 2020. And then, you know, in the next 4 years, it's actually Biden who's disqualified. Americans have shut him out. And, you know, it's a shame, too, because Kamala probably had a great career ahead of her. She'd have had a chance to sharpen her skills. So now she'll just become a political curiosity in the museum of wasted vice presidential candidates.
Obviously, last time President Trump was in charge, the world was thrown into a health and economic crisis by COVID. That wasn't entirely his fault, probably wasn't in any way his fault. But what does the second term look like for Donald Trump?
Oh, I think he's past the learning curve, Charles. He's going to be surrounded by people who are more conscientious better minders, yeah, he's going to be, he's going to be doing Donald Trump things. He's going to be tweeting things at 3 o'clock in the morning, upsetting financial markets and European and Asian politicians all over the world. Yeah, he'll continue to do those kinds of things. But I think he's going to be more moderate. I listened to his victory speech, which was quite conciliatory, really. He certainly got bragging rights. He gets to do a lap or two, but it was a little kinder than it had to be. And he made it very clear that he's there for the American people. And keep this in mind, too. I think he's in a better position. If he brings back, the Senate comes back Republican, it's not just that he can pass legislation, because the Senate always argues with each other about different things, even if they're from the same party. But he's going to be able to pass all of his cabinet appointments, judicial appointments, and high-level appointments. If Senate isn't favorable to you, they can keep you in limbo forever. So he's going to have a well-oiled machine. I think he's going to reach in all the right places. Yes, he's going to bring immigration and he's going to bring trade to the forefront. He discovered the Chinese were cheating on trade and he was going to hold them accountable. And he just happened to be way ahead of the curve because the Democrats hadn't picked that up yet. And so, he's going to be pounding these things. Australia's going to have a little bit of a problem here. Australia always has to choose between its prosperity, which is tied up with Beijing, and its security, which is tied up with Washington. This is, in my 51 years in this country, Australia has always been asked to make hard choices. And I haven't seen an Australian government that has given up anything in exchange for nothing. They don't really follow the American tune, but they are locked in step. For example, in recent years, Australia's defense policy is now interoperable with the United States and even with Britain to a certain extent. And with the submarines, it's even becoming interchangeable. So if an American sub is in a firefight in the South China Sea and you lose 21 Australian submariners, is Australia at war? Oh, I don't know. So, Trump may want to clarify that a little bit. And Australia, Trump likes Australia. He reckons they pay their bills, and Australia has this long history of working with the United States. Charles, when I came here and I found out that Menzies gave a speech in Congress called "Through Thick and Thin," and then I got to hear about Harold Holt, who talked about all the way with LBJ in Vietnam, and then John Gordon, whom I got to meet at the University of Queensland, where he says, "We'll go waltzing Matilda with you wherever you go." Well, Australia's been very, very supportive of U.S. policies. But once in a while, U.S. policies go off in different directions, and Australia may have to take some choices in the future. At the end of the day, when you are partnered up with an 800-pound gorilla, you got to be very careful how you handle yourself. So Australia's done a very good job in my time here. So, but I don't think any roiling in politics here, because Australians get on very well with the United States.
Well, you've seen 15 presidents, I'm assuming therefore weren't around when Grover Cleveland came back after losing into the Oval Office. But look, we've both seen a bit of history tonight. Appreciate you being part of the program. Thank you. Well, this will truly be the golden age of America. That was the promise of the President-elect Donald Trump as he spoke to his party faithful in Florida. Here is part of what he said.
This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. And frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond. And now it's going to reach a new level of importance because we're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country. And we made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that. We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? But it's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. And every citizen, I will fight for you, for your family, and your future. Every single day, I will be fighting for you, and with every breath in my body, I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have. This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.
President-elect Donald Trump reacting to the win. They're waking up in Europe and the Middle East right now. We'll get reactions from there. Plus, what it all means for Australia. That's coming up on Nine's election special right after. If you're just joining us, welcome to Nine's special coverage of the US election live from here in Washington, D.C. on what is an incredible day for America and an incredible day once again for the Trump family and President-elect Donald Trump. Large parts of the world are waking up to the news out of the United States. Let's head live to Nine's Europe correspondent, Edward Godfrey, who is in London for us this evening. Edward, good morning to you there. Take us through the reaction in London and in Europe.
Well, Charles, you're right. Yeah, large parts of the world are waking up and world leaders all over are reacting to another Trump presidency. Some, no doubt, enthused about that. Others, perhaps, a little more anxious. Starting here in the UK with Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. He's saying he's congratulated Donald Trump, saying he looks forward to working together with him in the years ahead, saying as the closest of allies, we stand shoulder to shoulder in defence of our shared values of freedom, democracy and enterprise. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was among the first to make a statement, saying congratulations on history's greatest comeback. Your historic return to the White House offers a new beginning for America and a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and America. This is a huge victory. Now, with a growing war in the Middle East, a change of presidency will be significant. Israel and the US are very close allies. The US supplies much of Israel's arsenal. The Biden administration repeatedly doubled down on its support for Israel while publicly and privately trying to de-escalate the conflict with Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, but seemingly wasn't able to have a lot of influence on Israel's decisions. So it'll be interesting to see what a Trump presidency would mean for that war. On to another major conflict. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is another to post on X, saying Ukraine, as one of Europe's strongest military powers, is committed to ensuring long-term peace and security in Europe and the transatlantic community with the support of our allies. Now, the war with Russia has been going on for more than 2.5 years. Trump has previously said he would end the war should he return to the White House. The big question will be exactly how he would do that and what shape that would take. French President Emmanuel Macron has also posted saying, ready to work together as we did for 4 years, with your convictions and mine, with respect and ambition for more peace and prosperity. And NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte has tweeted saying, I look forward to working with him again to advance peace through strength through NATO. So, Charles, a change of leadership in the United States, but one, as we know, which has a huge ripple effect right around the world and a big impact on politics everywhere and lives everywhere too, Charles.
Yeah, when you change the president, you change the world. We just don't know how quite yet. Edward, thank you. There is news just in. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has congratulated Donald Trump on the win tonight. Here are the Prime Minister's words.
I congratulate President Trump on his victory in the election, and I look forward to working in the interests of both of our nations. Australia and the United States are great friends. Based upon our common values, the relationship that we have in areas like national security, our trade, and importantly, our commitment to great democracies. And we've seen the American people have their say today, and they've elected Donald Trump as the President of the United States, and I congratulate him on his election.
And from Opposition Leader Peter Dutton, he just posted, may the years ahead be some of our most defining for the alliance, and may we unleash the defence, industrial and economic opportunities of AUKUS at speed and scale. That's Peter Dutton earlier this evening. Well, let's have a look now as we are joined by former Reagan staffer Kim Hoggard, who has been a part of our program throughout the evening. We appreciate her time and staying up again. Kim, what stood out to you most about the results that you're seeing so far?
Well, I agree with other people that have spoken earlier on your program that I'm not surprised that he's won, but I am surprised that it's looking to be a very significant win, and not only that, a win in the popular vote, which he never obtained before. And I've read, don't know this myself, but I've read that one of the reasons that he campaigned in some states that were considered not to be Republican, that they were Democrat states, such as California and New York, and even Virginia, he ran in order to try to run up his popular vote count. So I think it must have been personally important to him, because he might not have felt that his first time winning in 2020 with just the Electoral College was enough to legitimize his win. So that was a canny desire on his part to achieve that. So, and also that the result, it was so quick to come, and that just shows that the people that the Democrats were expecting to turn out for Harris didn't turn out for her, and that was a lot of Latino vote. She didn't get the Latino vote that Biden got. He got about 65% of that vote. She got about half, and working class voters really still connected with Biden, and I think for the Democrats, he was the last holdover or holdout on those votes. They really are Republican voters now.
Kamala Harris is the second woman to lose to Donald Trump. By my count, there's been 5 tickets that have a woman somewhere on there, either as president or vice president. Only one, and that is Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris has been successful. Is America just not ready for a female president, or just not ready for this female president?
Oh, I think both Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris were 2 qualified women who were capable of holding the presidency. I think America, I do think that's a factor in Harris's loss. I think it's a sad commentary on where America is. I know a lot of the people that I've spoken to in America who were Republicans, people that I worked with in the Reagan and Bush administrations, they were not enthusiastic about her. And they said quite, stridently that they were not determining their vote based on her gender. They just felt that she wasn't qualified. I respectfully disagree. But I find it ironic that American voters in 2020 were complaining about 2 old men running for office in Biden and Trump, and were calling for generational change, which she represented, and still decided to go back to a 78-year-old former president to be their leader once again. So I do find there a bit of hypocrisy in that decision. I know a lot of Americans will say, well, it was the economy. And I do think the Biden administration did not do a good job at touting their own economic record. And I suppose there'll be a lot of reflections on how Harris could have made a better case for her campaign. But as a previous person you spoke to said, she only had just over 100 days to get it done. She stuck to the script. Trump didn't, and that people seem to prefer the strong man leader at this point in America's history.
Kim, thanks so much for staying up and for being part of our coverage all the way through the day. You go get some sleep, and we'll look forward to speaking to you shortly. Our US election special continues after this break. Welcome back to our election coverage after an extraordinary night in American history. And as you can see behind me, the sun is rising over the Capitol, leading to a second extraordinary day. Donald Trump claiming victory to become the nation's 47th president when he's sworn in at the building behind me in January. Joining me now is John Hart, a US political expert from the Australian National University in Canberra. John, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. Firstly, what did you make of the results as they stand right now?
Well, one thing that is clear is the results showed that most of the polls were wrong. They portrayed, or at least the averaging of polls, gave the impression that the race was very, very close. And I think most commentary tended to be based on that during the campaign. In the end, it turned out not to be close. Kamala Harris was 5 million votes short of Donald Trump's popular vote in the nation at large, as well as losing in the Electoral College. That's the first thing. Secondly, I think it's not definitive yet, but it looks like the economic issues and the cost of living issues outranked the abortion issue, the democracy issue, Trump's threat to democracy, Trump's character. All those things resonated less with the electorate than the cost of living. And Kamala Harris was in a bit of an unenviable position of having to defend Joe Biden's economic record. And I think it illustrates a point about incumbent vice presidents who run for president. Most of them don't succeed. That is, run for president while they are actually vice president. In the last 100 years, you've had Richard Nixon in 1960, Hubert Humphrey in 1968, Al Gore in 2000, and now Kamala Harris in 2024. The only incumbent vice president who's ever won the presidency from the vice presidency was George Bush in 1988. So I think it illustrates that vice presidents are in a particularly difficult position. She was constrained in terms of how she could campaign. She certainly couldn't criticize Joe Biden. And I agree with your previous speaker. She didn't have a great deal of time to establish a campaign appeal that resonated with voters.
Given that, should Joe Biden have stepped down earlier?
Yes, I think he should. I think it was initially when he became president, he talked about being a one-term president and handing over to a new generation. And Kamala Harris certainly made that new generation line a key plank of her campaign. That didn't work. And I think looking back on it, Biden has got to carry some of the blame for hanging on too long.
Finally, what happens next for the Democrats?
A lot of soul searching. They need to look very carefully at where they lost votes in 2024 that they had in 2020. That will require not just impressionistic gut feelings about what went wrong. It will require a lot of hard data, a lot of survey data. And I think at the bottom of it, what the Democratic Party are likely to find is that the traditional Democratic base is declining even faster than we estimated. The working class Democrat voter now seems to be firmly in the Republican camp. If the Democrats can reverse that, well, I'm not sure how they can do it at the moment. But their current appeal clearly isn't working. And not working in an extraordinary year where there's been no candidate like Donald Trump. No candidate has run the kind of controversial campaign that he's run. It's makes it even harder to explain the Democratic defeat. But I think a careful, reflective study of survey data about what voters were doing will be important. And remember, this is carried through to congressional level races as well. The Democrats have done pretty badly in the Senate. They've lost control of the Senate, and it's certainly not clear that they're going to win control of the House. Probably not. So Trump will come into office with a Republican Senate, probably a Republican House, and of course a Republican Supreme Court. So we do have to worry about how the traditional constitutional checks and balances in the American system are going to work.
As he did in 2016. Hey, John, thanks so much for being part of the program tonight.
A pleasure.
Well, Kamala Harris supporters left the Vice President's watch party when it was announced that she wouldn't be making her way to the stage and addressing them. Instead, she's pledged to speak to the nation a little later today, our time, tomorrow, your time, in what will be a concession speech.
Democrat headquarters, Washington, D.C., in the dying hours of her campaign. Kamala Harris working the phones to try and squeeze out every possible vote. Everyone knew it would be a close race, but the Democrats were optimistic.
Thank you so very much. You know, it's so important that everybody participates.
Thousands gathering at a watch party in the Capitol that already felt like a celebration. Held at Howard University, Kamala's alma mater, just a few kilometres from the White House.
We believe in her, what she's doing, her policies, the plan she has in place.
What inspired you to vote?
The future of myself, my family, my future kids one day.
When a state fell Kamala's way, a mighty cheer. But she was only picking up those she was expected to win.
The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with its 11 electoral votes, as expected, will go to Kamala Harris.
And Trump was matching her. Initial counts had much of the country turning Republican red. Soon, the crowd was subdued. Then, they were showing their disapproval. The former president well on his way.
Donald Trump has 195 electoral votes.
The heat was on, but the Harris faithful were still clinging to hope and praying for a turnaround. The path to 270 is steep, and this is a marathon and not a sprint. But the anxiety here is high, and it feels like Kamala Harris's campaign is running out of steam. You didn't need a polling expert. The faces told the story. The Republican candidate moving ahead in the battleground states, the swing to Trump hitting home.
It must run through your head all the time to have Donald Trump running for president after what unfolded on January 6th.
It's insane. It's infuriating. Maybe it's just as simple as a lot of Americans just don't care. It's not a big deal to them what happened on January 6th. That's the only thing I can take away from it.
The final word from the Harris campaign, it wasn't over.
We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the Vice President tonight.
He promised she will address the nation tomorrow, a speech that will now almost certainly be a concession.
It's not the elite that's going to pay the price. It's people who woke up this morning with a dream and are going to bed with a nightmare.
In Washington, D.C., Alison Petrowski, 9 News.
We'll take a quick break here on 9's Election Special and be back right after this. You're watching 9's Election Special on what is a new day. You can see by the sun here in Washington, D.C. It's been an extraordinary few hours with Donald Trump making one of the greatest political comebacks the world has ever seen. We're joined now to discuss this and more by our next guest, April Parmalee. She was the Assistant Secretary of State under George W. Bush and now heads up the Australian Chamber of Commerce, Australian-American Chamber of Commerce in Australia. April, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, what does business look like under Donald Trump, the man who ran to be good for business?
Good morning. This is a good thing in many ways for a lot of the sectors of the economy. You've seen the U.S. dollar surge on the election of Donald Trump. The shares for Truth Social and Tesla are off the charts. And of course, Bitcoin reached a record high today. We'll see the traditional energy stocks flying higher as well on the hopes of the drill baby drill president coming into office. And most businesses are expecting that he will have a less regulatory approach, which would mean that there'd be more movement in the M&A market.
Yeah, less regulatory, except for when it comes to tariffs on some of the imports. What's the feeling amongst Australian businesses about imports and exports, given that looming threat?
I think it's a wait-and-see situation with the tariffs. Under Trump 1.0, there was a lot of talk, and what I counseled our members to do was to look at what President Trump did and not just listen to what he said, because his actions often were very pro-business, while his rhetoric was a little bit more undisciplined. And so looking at what he has said he's going to do on corporate taxes is very promising for a lot of businesses. If he does continue the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that he put into place in 2017, and which will expire next year, and bring the corporate tax rate down even further to 15%, that is going to mean that the Australian corporate tax rate of 30% really is an outlier and stands out pretty starkly against what's available in the United States. The costs of energy will also be pretty dramatically different between the United States and Australia. But I don't think anybody's panicking just yet about these tariffs that he's talked about. You'll remember that he imposed Section 232 on steel tariffs during his last presidency. And through some very deft maneuvering, we were able to escape those tariffs because he sees Australia as a strong and important ally. And we have a good balance of trade with them. And since he was president last time, we've also promised to invest $3 billion in the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal into America. So things are going in the right direction.
In your experience with him and with his administrations in the past, do you think he has a place in his heart for Australia, or at least a respect for Australia, given we have that trade deficit?
Yeah, I do. I feel very strongly that not only President Trump, but most of the MAGA Republicans who I've met in Washington, and I have spent a lot of time meeting them when I've been in the States the last 5 or 6 times, as well as senators, congressmen, and the bureaucrats have a very big place in their heart for Australia. Whenever I go over to America as chairman of AmChams of the Asia Pacific, people very much want to talk about Australia before any of the other countries in the region. They see it as the anchor of democracy in the Pacific, and they've been very interested to hear what it was like in Australia during the period where we were suffering from the economic coercion from the CCP after the inquiry into the origins of COVID. So Australia, I think, will continue to have a high place on the American subconscious, but especially Donald Trump should be well disposed to liking Australia again.
Well, the opening bell's a few hours away on Wall Street, and we'll see what our markets do tomorrow as well. April, thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Stay with us. Our election special continues right after this break. Well, with the sun rising here in Washington, we're going to continue our coverage with our colleagues at CNN.
Sent a congratulatory statement to Donald.
Well, I mean, in addition to that, I think the hostages coming home is probably very much farther down on his list, because now he knows he's got carte blanche to do whatever he wants. He was hoping for a Trump win because I think he knew that Trump was going to let him do. Hey, he's also going to stay out of jail now, right? He was going to let him do as he pleases in the Middle East. And that, despite Trump saying he will get us out of wars, that is an area where we could find ourselves very much more entangled, given that is becoming a broader conflict in the region.
I actually, we saw some of the things early today, like Russia calling, or bomb threats, I don't want to say the state of Russia, but bomb threats coming in Georgia that the Secretary of State said emanated from Russia. So you saw that play a role. But the war in Gaza played a more looming role, I think, particularly in a state like Michigan. You saw in Dearborn, for example, certain precincts. There are precincts in Dearborn, Michigan, that Kamala Harris finished third. I mean, you have Trump, Jill Stein, and then Kamala Harris finishing third in those precincts. I'm interested as we go through, I don't know if purge is the right word. I think that Republicans were going to go through a purge, Jeff, if Donald Trump would have lost, they were going to be able to have this kind of reckoning. I think Democrats are going to have this reckoning, and I'm interested to see how a part of our coalition, Arab American voters, those individuals who were pro-Palestinian, are going to analyze this race and what Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the impact that's going to have in the war on Gaza. Because I just go back to Jared Kushner saying that Gaza would be good beachfront property, right? And I'm interested to see how individuals who either set out or chose Jill Stein to punish the Democratic Party are going to reconcile that with what happens with Bibi Netanyahu. I, for one, believe we're going to have more chaos. If you're going to, I pray that he puts somebody like a Marco Rubio, and I don't know if I've ever verbally said that I'm praying for Marco Rubio out loud, but I'm praying that he puts somebody like Marco Rubio who at least has some sense of decency and common sense, although I don't agree with his policies per se as Secretary of State, so we at least have a level of stability. My concern with Donald Trump is the lack of stability in our global standing.
I mean,
Rubio's
Casey, the
never
big
going to be
question
confirmed now.
The big
They're going to
question,
just play that over and over and over.
The big question for me in terms of foreign policy is China, for a couple of different reasons. I'm looking at their technological advancements with